Good morning everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's session on the exchange rate features of SAP Business One. My name is Dawn Parker and I'm the Technical Director at IIS. For your information, we will be recording this session to make it available later. Therefore, please remain on mute during the presentation. It's also important to note that I will be demonstrating this morning on SAP Business One 8.81. Therefore, if you notice some differences in the screens, it's probably because of that particular version. Okay, so this morning I'm going to show you how to maintain your exchange rates, how to set up foreign currency business partners and accounts, how the system will use the exchange rate in sales and purchasing transactions, how the system will use the exchange rate in banking, how we can use the exchange rate differences routine, and finally how to use the conversion differences routine. There will be a short time for questions at the end, so if you can make a note of them as we go along, and then hopefully we should have plenty of time at the end for that. Okay, so firstly, how to set up exchange rates. Okay, well, we find that in the administration section of the menu, and it's the top but one item here, exchange rates and indexes. And when we open it, it opens in the current period, and you can see all the different currencies that you have set up, and then the individual exchange rates that you've set. Now, it's possible to set the exchange rate literally day by day if you want to. So each of these cells here represents a day of the month. In this case, as you can see, I've got all the exchange rates set to the same values. So the quick way of setting the exchange rates for the whole period is to go to Set Rate for Selection Criteria, tick the box here for Euro, and to type in the exchange rate that you want. Okay, so type in €1.12, and then you can see it sets that value throughout the period. Okay, it's also possible for you to have this particular exchange rate table pop up in the morning when you first log into SAP. So that if you do want to maintain them on a daily basis, you also have the option to do that. And to do that, you can go to System Initialization, General Settings, and Services, and Open Exchange Rates Table. So if you tick that box there for a particular user, then when they first log into SAP in the morning, that exchange rate table will open and they'll be able to update it there and then. The important thing to note is that if you're using any kind of foreign currency account in SAP and you don't have the appropriate exchange rate set up, then this table will pop up and you will be forced to enter an exchange rate before you can process a transaction. So it's not possible to post one without the correct exchange rate in place. In terms of setting up other currencies, again, SAP comes with a number of currencies already pre-defined, but we have the ability to set up additional currencies, and again we can do that through Setup, Financials, and Currencies. And again you can just add the details of the currency in here, and then it will appear in this table for you to maintain the corresponding exchange rate. Another facility that may be of use to you if you're using more than one Business One company in the organisation is the ability to set up the exchange rates in one company and then copy those exchange rates across to the other companies. And we can do that by using this export-import function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all the exchange rates for June and say auto export. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over to my other company here. I'm going to bring up the exchange rates table and auto import and it copies in the exchange rate. So again, it's a quick way of doing that, particularly if you have more than one company within the organisation. So I'm just going to update that now. Okay. So that's how we make sure that the currencies are set up and the necessary exchange rates for processing are set up. A couple of other setup pieces of information that we need to know, and these will have been done at the point when you're first setting up the system before when you're implementing. So if we go into system initialization and company details and we select the basic initialization tab here, two important settings that we have to make, say at the beginning, at the point of implementation, are the local currency that we're going to be trading in. So in the UK, most companies will have that set to British pound. Companies in Ireland would have that set to euro. And then we also have the ability to define what's called the system currency. Now in this example, I've got a system currency set to euro. And what this means is that all the transactions that I'm going to post into the system are going to be stored both in British pounds and euros. And I can run the financial reports by either local currency or system currency. Now this can be useful for any companies who have a parent company perhaps, or some other reason why they need to produce accounts or financial reports in something other than their local currency. So in this case I could run the reports in either British pounds or euros. Okay. There's another setting here which also says when I set up new accounts, so GL codes, how do I set them? Do I make them local currency or all currencies? Okay, so again, you can see that particular value can be changed at any time, whereas my local currency and my system currency, once set, are fixed for the system, and it's not possible to change them later. So that's why it's important. That would be one of the things that we would go through with you at the point of implementation. Okay, so once we've set up the system settings as far as exchange rates are concerned, we also then will need to set up our business partners. Okay, so I have a foreign currency business partner, USD1, and it has a single currency value of US dollars. Now, if I go into the drop down here, you can see that I just have the two options, US dollar and all currencies. And that's because once you've posted a transaction against a business partner for a single currency, such as US dollars, it's not possible to change them then, say, to sterling or euros. It's only possible to change them to all currencies. So you can see that the balance here is displayed in the business partner's currency of US dollars. If I change it to local currency, I can see it in pounds. If I change it to system currency, I can see it in euros. Okay, so if I go back to the business partner currency, we can see their balance in euros, sorry, in dollars. Okay, if I was going to add a new business partner, then I would have the option to select any of my currencies that I have set up in my currencies table. Okay, so so it means it's very important that when you're setting up accounts, that whoever's responsible for doing that selects the correct currency. Because, as I said earlier, once you've created transactions against the business partner, it's not possible to, say, change from pounds to euros or to dollars, for example. Okay. Okay. The same applies with suppliers. Again, you can select either single currency or all currencies. The important thing to note if you're using all currencies is that whenever you go to create a sales or purchasing transaction for that business partner, the system will always default initially to your local currency. So again, it's very important if you're using all currencies to make sure that the person responsible for creating the transactions remembers to select the appropriate currency at the point when they're creating it. Okay, if we just go then to the chart of accounts as well, we can just see some of the GL codes that have been created. So if I scroll down here, for example, down to my bank details, I can see that my general current account that I use for all my different transactions is set to all currencies. If I go down to my US dollar bank account, it's only set for US dollars. Okay, so typically, generally most people, I would say, set all the accounts in the system to all currencies if they know there's a possibility they're going to be trading in foreign currencies. Okay, if I go back then to my business partner, okay, right, so USD1 was my business partner. So I can see I already have a bit of a balance here for him, but I'm now going to create a new sales transaction for this account. So if I go to sales, and I'm going to go straight to an invoice for speed, I select my account and I select some items. Okay, so you can see straight away that the system has brought in the business partner currency, it's brought in US dollars, I can't change that, and it's brought in the exchange rate from the exchange rate table. Okay, so if I wanted to, if I had an agreement with the business partner, I could set a different exchange rate in here manually. Okay, so if I can see here that in this case the unit price from the price list that this account is pointing to is set to sterling. So using that exchange rate, the difference has been converted into US dollars to give the business partner the balance in their particular currency. Okay, so if I add this transaction and create it here, and if I go back to my invoice, I go to my accounting tab and go into my journal, I can see here now that my transaction is represented in my foreign currency, so FC, everywhere you see that abbreviation, that's the foreign currency. I can see the local currency in sterling, and then I can see my system currency equivalent in euros. Okay, so again, depending on whether I'm using all these different currencies in my particular system, I can choose whether or not I want to display system currency or not, or foreign currency or not, just by ticking and unticking these boxes. Okay, so just ignore that. Okay, so that's looking at the journal that's been created for this particular invoice. If I go through to my business partner and go to their balance, I can see similarly, I can choose to see all the information about the transactions that have been posted to their account in local currency, foreign currency and system currency. Okay, and again I can use form settings to determine which of those columns I want switched on or off. Okay, so again, for those of you who aren't using a different system currency, there's no need for you to have the system currency columns selected, because it's not going to show you different information. Okay, so we've looked at a sales transaction for this particular US dollar account. If I was to go through a purchasing transaction, a purchase invoice, I would see exactly the same results, in the sense that I would have a foreign currency value, a local currency value and a system currency value. If I now go through to my aging report for this particular account and run it just like this, I can see that my the balance of my account here in my local currency is £404.15. I can choose to see it in my business partner account currency, so $634.56. I can also choose to see it in system currency if necessary. So I have a number of options there. Now when I'm looking at it in local currency, I'm actually looking at the individual values of all the different transactions as they've been posted in the system. In 8.81, we actually have a new facility which allows us to translate leading currency at aging date. So if I select that now and go into here and say OK, I can see now that my local currency balance is actually altered, because what the system has done here is it's in effect converted all the balances that are due into the prevailing exchange rate as at the aging date of my report. So that actually gives us quite a lot more visibility than we've had previously. So I think that was certainly a very useful addition to the system in 8.81. Okay, so if we now move into the banking facility for SAP Business One, so I'm just going to close all these down. Okay, so if we go down to banking and select incoming payments and incoming payments, and we select our dollar account. Okay, we can see here that they have a number of different transactions that are outstanding. So this first invoice is for $250.25. If I drill through to look at the invoice itself, I can see that when this invoice was posted, it was done at an exchange rate of $1.40. So if I was to just switch that to view it in local currency, I would see that the value at that point in sterling was £178.75. Now, we're obviously operating on a different exchange rate today. So let's just go back to that. Okay, so if I select this invoice now, today's exchange rate is 195, which is obviously considerably different. So if I look at my amount due in sterling, you can see that that is now £128.02, which again is quite different from the 178. So if I go into my payment means and select my bank account, which was 161025, so that's my US dollar account. I'm going to copy in the total here. So the customer is still paying me $250.25. Now, if I right click and choose the journal entry preview, again this is a new facility that exists in 881 also. Again, very useful if you're uncertain as to what postings the system's going to make when you press the add button. This allows you to just check it in advance to save you having to go back and reverse the transaction. So you can see here that my debtors account is being credited with the $250.25 and at the £178.75. The bank account is getting $250.25, but from a debit point of view now, because of the exchange rate difference, it's now only worth £128.02. Therefore, the difference will be posted to the realised foreign exchange loss account. And again, you can set up separate accounts for the gains and losses in the P&L, and I'll show you in a minute where you can set those up in the system initialization tables. Okay, so if I go ahead and post that transaction, and go back and look at the journal, we'll see now that that journal has been posted there. Okay, so that's how we get the difference between the 178.75 and the 128.02. So the difference, say, is posted to the realised foreign exchange loss or gain account, depending on which way round or which favour it's in. Okay, so that is how SAP Business One processes the exchange rate losses and gains in terms of payments against invoices. Now, I'll just show you where we set up those accounts, and it's in System Initialization. Let's set up Financials, GL Account Determination. So we can set up in here, under the sales section, realised exchange difference losses and gains, purchasing. Again, if you want to, you can have different accounts, or you can set them to be the same. Okay, so those need to be predefined if you're going to be working with foreign currencies in the system, to make sure that there's somewhere for the system to post the account. Again, otherwise you'll get a red error message and you won't be able to proceed until you've filled in the tables. Okay, now in terms of the ongoing process with exchange rate losses and gains, if you're trading with a number of customers and suppliers in foreign currencies, there may be a time delay between the invoice being created and the payment being received. You know, typically people have payment terms of 30, 60, maybe even more days. And in this case, if your exchange rates are volatile and potentially you're raising large volumes of transactions that have a foreign currency implication, then this can mean that there are significant exchange losses or gains that are building up in the system. So in that intervening period, to report on these unrealised losses and gains, you have the ability to run something called the exchange rate differences routine. This will recommend journal postings to reflect these unrealised losses and gains. Okay, so let's look at where we can find this. So if we go into Financials and we go to Exchange Rate Differences, when the screen opens up, there's several options here that we can select. We can select GL accounts, or we can select business partners, and again the account details are pulled in from our exchange rate losses and gains defaults that we saw earlier on. So in the first instance, I'm going to look at the business partner one. So I can do it for a particular business partner, I can do it for customers, suppliers, or I can use properties. So in this case, I'm just going to run it for all business partners. I'm going to run it for 31st of May, and I'm just going to run it for US dollars initially, and when I execute that, okay, you can see here that I have just the one account come up, because I think this is my only US dollar business partner, and you can see here that the system is saying that at the 31st of May, the balance in foreign currency was $190.37, and the balance in sterling was 117.50, with an exchange rate of 1.61. That gave me a difference of 0.74. Okay, so what I can do now is I can accept or reject that journal posting, and the option you have is that you can, for example, on the business partner exchange rate unrealised losses and gains, if you wish, you can create those as reversing journals so that they're created for your monthly or quarterly or annual reporting, financial reports, and then at the beginning of the next period, that particular journal will be reversed, because at some point the actual payment will be made and then you'll have a realised loss or gain processed at that point. So I can put in a reference, I can put in exchange rate, diff, May 2011, tick auto reverse, and in this case, because I'm already past the end of the month, it's just picked tomorrow's date there. I can tick that and add that here. Okay, so if I go to look at the journal that's been created, I can see that it's posted this difference against the debtors account, and then it's posted the difference into the realised foreign exchange gains account. Now again, I could set up a different set of accounts to use for my unrealised losses and gains if I wanted to. You can also see it's posted it in the system currency here. Okay, so that gives you the ability then to report as accurately as possible around your potential losses and gains, your unrealised losses and gains when you come to do your financial reports. If we then go back, for example, and run it for GL accounts, again, if I pick the same date, the same currency for now, I'm just going to put an account in here. Okay, so again, in this case, you can see my US dollar bank account needs to have an adjustment of 63 pence against it. So again, on a regular basis, I can revalue my foreign currency accounts. So if I tick that and put a remark in, I can add that and go back to here. And again, if I go down to my journals and go to the last one, I can see now that my US dollar bank account has been credited with 63 pence and the realised foreign exchange losses account has been updated with 63 pence. Okay, and again, similarly, because of my system currency being different, I also have that system currency posting value there. Okay, so, and if I just tick on there, you can see that this doesn't affect my foreign currency balance because obviously that hasn't changed. It's just my local currency and system currency account values that have changed. Okay, so the final routine that I wanted to look at today is what's something called the conversion differences. Okay, now typically this is used for those customers who are running with a different system currency. So in this particular case, we are using a different system currency. We're using euros, and generally we can revalue in effect the system currency balances based on any exchange rate differences that have occurred as the system is progressing. So this is also found in financials. So again, if I open it up, it looks similar to the screen we saw earlier, but this is going to post a sort of quite a special type of journal. So again, I can set up particular exchange rate differences account in here. It's pulled in one as a default. So if I just run it for GL accounts to start with and execute that, I'll just have to put the execution date in. Okay, so again, when I run that, you can see I've been quite remiss in running this. So I've got quite a few differences that the system is recommending that I correct. So, for example, if I pick my trade investments one here, it's basically telling me that the balance, what the balances are, local currency and system currency, and what the difference ought to be. So if I just create the journal for this, and add it, cancel out of there and go back into the journals and go to the journal. I can see here that it's a special type of journal because the only account balance that it's affecting is the system currency value. Okay, so it would not be possible to create a journal in SAP any other way than through the conversion differences routine. So if you are running a system currency and that's different from your local currency and you do need to produce reports in that system currency, then you would need to make use of this routine to keep your system currency balance in line with exchange rate changes. Okay, in terms of what I had planned to show you today, that is all the different elements of exchange rate processing. So if any of you have any general questions about exchange rate processing, if we can go ahead now and try and get those asked and answered. So I'm going to okay. Okay, I've got a question here from, is it Christine? Sorry, Christine, I'm not hearing you. Can you maybe put your question into the questions panel? Right, okay, I'm seeing some questions now. Apologies for the sound there. Okay. Okay. Right, so I've got a question here. Since upgrading to SAP 8.1, my aged debtors and creditors ledger no longer agree to the nominal ledger, and this difference is changing daily. Can this be caused by some change in the way foreign exchange is handled in this version of SAP? Our ledgers have both euro and sterling balances on the one ledger. I think the best thing there would be, that's from Sandra Murphy. Without actually looking into your system, Sandra, it would be quite difficult to comment on specific differences. In terms of the way in which SAP handles the exchange rates, there's been no fundamental change. So I think this would be something we'd have to look at offline. So if that's okay with you, we'll pick this up after the call. so we can look at your particular situation. Okay, let's see if we've got any other questions. Okay, any more written questions? Okay, right. Okay, another written question here. I pay creditors within the month and set the rate up at the beginning of the month. There is no delay. How do I revalue the sterling banks? Okay, that's from Christine. Okay, right. Well, you would only need to revalue the, well, I mean, it depends whether or not you're setting, whether you have different exchange rates between the transactions. You would, if you want to revalue the sterling bank, I'm assuming here that you're running in euros normally, then you would use the exchange rate differences routine against your bank account. So at the end of the period, you would run it and it would pick up the any differences that have occurred. I mean, if there's no differences occurring during that period, and your foreign currency rate for your bank account hasn't altered from one period to the next, then there will be no differences. So, but by running this routine, the system will pick up if there are any differences. Okay, so you know, if you run this routine and the system is going to find any differences in the transactions that are existing in there, then we will revalue it. But for bank accounts, that's also going to vary from one period to the next. I mean, again, the other thing is you may end up picking up exchange rate differences from your bank account through bank statement reconciliation as well. Okay. Any other questions at this rate? Okay, well, apologies we haven't been able to unmute you this morning for some reason. So if there are no other questions on the actual webinar itself at this time, obviously if you have got individual questions about your specific system, then you know, by all means send those into us, and we can obviously tackle those you know, through our support facility. If there's no more questions at this time, just one more wait and see if there are any more questions coming through on the chat or the questions option. If there aren't any more, then I'd like to thank you very much for your interest and the time you've taken this morning to join us. We look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks' time. The next webinar is planned to be on the use of crystal reports in Business One. So thank you again for your time and good morning.